There we go. Hey everybody, how are you? Good evening. Welcome to another edition of Grassroots Motorsports Live. Let me turn this thing all the way down and let me pull out my own personal device here. As you all know, this is Grassroots Motorsports Live presented by CRC Industries. I'm JG Pasterjack. It is Wednesday, September 27th. I'm going on my very own personal social media page, and I'm going to find this video on the Grassroots Motorsports Facebook site. Look at that. There we are, right there. I've created a wormhole just by doing that. And I'm going to share this very video right here. Maybe I'm not. Hang on. Yes, I'm going to share it on my timeline. Look at that. I shared it. It took me an extra click, but I managed. I would appreciate it if you did the same. That is the currency that we operate under these days in social media land. And if you give us a share, you give us a like, you know, if that's what you can do for us tonight, I appreciate it. Folks, welcome to the shop. Once again, we are back in business. It's nice getting back to regular shows here after all the adventures of this summer, the hurricanes and the travel and the whatnot. And we are back here in the shop. Thanks to the gang from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University that came out last week to show us their eco car. If you go back in our Facebook archives, in our YouTube archives, that video is there. These amazingly talented and intelligent students from our local Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University brought out their Camaro of the future to hang out with us for a while. Very cool show. Tonight we move from Camaros to Mustangs. You might recognize this very car behind me. This is our very own Project Mustang. It's a 2012 Ford Mustang GT that we have over the past 2 years built for SCCA's Classic American Muscle Autocross class, as well as events like the Optimus Search for the Ultimate Street Car, Good Guys Autocrossing, American Muscle Car Series, all of these fantastic muscle car performance series that are popping up all over the place in the last few years. The popularity of stuff like the I can't even think of the word. Not street touring. Ed, what am I trying to think of? God, I don't know. Somebody knows what I'm talking about. The street tuner. Live TV fail. Anyway, the popularity of muscle cars as things other than cars that go fast in a straight line. Pro touring is what I'm trying to think of. Thanks, whoever was about to post that online and help me out. The popularity of those movements has fueled cars and series like this, and always willing to jump in with both feet. We built this Mustang starting about 2 years ago. Now, if you guys have been followers of the live show for any period of time, this was a frequent feature on the live. We've showed you lots of individual pieces of this car on the show. We've never really done a complete technical breakdown and front to back sort of build diary on the car. If you've been reading the Grassroots Motorsports magazine over the past couple of years, you've seen the whole build on this thing. What we're going to try and do tonight is go through the entire car for folks that may have missed a piece here or there, or were not around when we were doing our initial beta testing phase of this show and saw some of the stuff we were doing to this car. So we want to give everybody a complete look at how this car was put together, some of the pieces that make it up, some of the different settings and different tricks that we've done to make it such a good performer. I'd like to thank all the folks that have joined us already tonight. If you've been able to throw us a like on Facebook, to share it on Facebook. If you've been able to join us on YouTube and you have a question, we have folks monitoring the YouTube chat. We have folks monitoring the Facebook chat. So if at any point you have questions throughout tonight's show, throw them in there. We'll do our best to answer them, and we'll do our best to answer them truthfully as well. Got to tell you about a couple of things before we get started on the Mustang action tonight. First is this show would absolutely not be possible without our friends from CRC Industries. We can see our CRC Brake Clean banner right back there. Actually, before every show, we do a couple of things. We actually use some of their display cleaner to clean off all of our camera lenses, all of our monitors that we use for our little broadcast booth back here, and we give our Steadicam a couple of shots of power loop so it doesn't squeak when Ed's back there using it and operating it and flying it around and making it look like, you know, I just scored a touchdown in an NFL game. Exactly. So they're not a squeak at all because of this stuff. Now, we were using CRC stuff long before they were sponsoring our show because it's good, because we love it, and also because every week, it seems, we discover a new product, one of their 15,000 or so odd different automotive and industrial chemicals that they make that we can use around the shop. We had that huge shelf of CRC stuff here long before they were sponsoring the show. It wasn't quite that neat. We spruced it up a little bit because they're on board. But guys, as I say every week, if you're reaching for automotive chemicals, if you're somewhere, if you got to buy brake cleaner, if you got to buy lubricant, and you're reaching for this CRC stuff, you know that you're getting not only a fantastic product, but you are getting a product from a company that supports the world that we enjoy ourselves in. Amateur and professional motorsports at every level. CRC is there, boots on the ground, doing stuff and helping support what we love. So this is a great, you know, buying something you need anyway, great chance to give back to the sport you love. Also want to take a look just above that and see the Autobooks-Aerobooks bookshelf. You can go to autobooks-aerobooks.com. They are a phenomenal brick and mortar bookstore located in Burbank, California, also with a fantastic internet presence. Any of their tens of thousands of books that they have on the shelf or available to them are available through their website. Everything from history of automotive, motorcycle, aircraft, watercraft, history, motorsports, technical manuals, photography books. Great stuff available there. Books you can put your hands on and sink yourself into and lose yourself in just by the act of reading. Check them out at autobooks-aerobooks.com. While you're there, if you're ever out in Southern California, they are not only a fantastic bookstore, they are a hub of automotive culture in Southern California. They have cruise-ins every week. They have book signings every week. They also have a calendar of stuff going on other places in Southern California besides them. So if you're ever out visiting LA or San Diego or, you know, anywhere out in the Los Angeles area and you want car stuff to do, autobooks-aerobooks.com. Check them out. They have a calendar of everything going on there. All right. You got a good crowd joining us tonight. Josh says he wishes he could like this more than once. Josh, go create another account and like it on that account too. No, we're not. We won't tell anybody. We'll not tell a soul that you did that. Let us take a look at Project Mustang. First, let's start out by talking a little bit about the rationale behind Project Mustang, what it is, and if you want to build your own late model performance Mustang, what to look for in one of these Coyote powered Mustangs. Coyote engine, quad cam V8, 415 horsepower or so, rated by the factory. Came standard in these S197 Mustangs 2011 through 2014. The motor carries on in similar specs. They've actually changed the chassis a little bit. After 2014, Mustangs went to an independent rear suspension. This is a 2012. This is still a live axle rear suspension car. If you're looking for a 2011 through 2014 Mustang, they are pretty much all the same. Depending on what you might want to do with them, the horsepower specs changed a little bit from year to year. 2013, they got a facelift in the front. But spec-wise, they're very, very similar, especially if you're going to start building something like this where you're going to be switching out intake systems and exhaust headers, and you're going to be doing some building. The only advice that I would really give somebody looking for a live axle Coyote Mustang is you might want to avoid the first year, the 2011 Mustangs. And this is only anecdotal evidence. We were never really able to track this down and look at any sort of hard numbers on this, but we do have a lot of anecdotal evidence that the first year cars, 2011s, had some electrical troubles with stuff like the electronic power steering controls, the ABS modules. There were some, it seems like every time we heard about something weird, you know, the electronic throttle modules, every time we heard about something weird going on with one of these Mustangs, it was a 2011. So that might be the only thing that I would recommend. Yeah, Andrew says the 5s through 10s are basically the same if you're not looking for a 5-liter. 2005 through 2010, that was a 4.6. There are a lot of folks out there that will argue with you all day long that those 4.6-liter Mustangs could be a superior car to the 5-liter car. And I don't, if you're going to modify the car especially, might not argue with you that much. It's a little bit lighter car ultimately, and it's actually easier to get it down to a fighting weight. So let us take a look at this particular Mustang and sort of what our rationale was in preparing this. SCCA's Classic American Muscle class is kind of a run what you brung, anything goes class for muscle cars. The CAM C class, C for Contemporary, that we run in, the rules are very simple. You have to run a 200 treadwear street tire. We are on BF Goodrich Rival S, 335, 3018s all the way around. Typically you're going to see competitors on either these Rival S's or a Bridgestone RE71R. Those are essentially the two hot competing tires right now. But that's when you're allowed to run any 200 treadwear street tire you want. Beyond that, the rules are fairly open. The car has to basically have the same silhouette that it came from. It came from the factory. If you want to switch out every single body panel on this thing with a lightweight alternative, you are more than welcome to do that. There are some very basic aerodynamic rules that are covered. For example, you're allowed to have a splitter, but the splitter is not allowed to stick out past the outline of the bumper. You're allowed to have a rear spoiler that is likewise contained within the footprint of the car and can only be a certain height. You have to have not necessarily a full interior, but a fully covered interior. You're not allowed to have sort of bare exposed panels in there. Again, you're allowed to substitute materials, you're allowed to substitute anything you want as long as you present it with a finished, neat appearance. The idea is to have essentially street cars with no other rules attached to them other than they are street legal, they are well prepared, and they are running on these 200 treadwear street tires. We also have minimum weights that we have to hit, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go into some of the things we've done to lighten things up. So, yeah, Josh said the feed paused for him for a second. No, Josh, these are 335s all the way around. 335, 3018. It's essentially the widest tire that BF Goodrich makes in this Rival S. They're on 11-inch wheels, and you'll see we had to make a couple little compromises to get tires of this width on the car, and we'll show you that once we get the car up in the air. Ed wants to know if we can run a rear seat delete kit. Yeah, we did run. I mean, this is literally a cheap eBay rear seat delete kit in here. It's 2 pieces of cardboard covered with, you know, the mouse fur, and we did save some weight that way. So actually, let's go ahead and start there with talking about some of our weight savings. So I mentioned there was a minimum weight for these CAM cars. In the case of CAM C, minimum weight is 3,200 pounds. If you switch out either your front or your rear glass to an alternate material, your minimum weight goes up to 3,350 pounds. At the 2016 Solo Nationals, this car went across the scales at 3,600 pounds. It was essentially a full street car. We had a passenger seat in there. It still has air conditioning, stereo, all of its speakers. It had a metal hood. It had its metal trunk. It had glass windows everywhere. And one of the things we really concentrated on over the winter of 2016 into the spring of 2017 was getting the weight down on the car considerably. We decided, we did some math. We decided that we weren't really going to get down to a 3,200 pound minimum weight anyway. Is it possible? Yeah. Were we willing to make the sacrifices to make it possible? Not really. We drove this car to nearly every event that it's gone to, in the last 2 years. So we had to retain air conditioning, or we wanted to retain air conditioning because we're in the Southeast. It's very hot. So we weren't really willing to do that. We wanted to keep a stereo in it. We wanted to keep it a functional street car, and it's, with the exception of a couple of events, it's gone under its own power, and with me driving, driven to every single event that that it's competed in. But we wanted to we got a good question here about descriptions for what's allowed in Camp C. Michael, we'll get to that in 1 second. We'll actually throw you a link to the rules in just a second. So we wanted to get the weight down considerably over the winter. So we started looking at alternate materials, including alternate glass for front and rear windshields, alternate materials for hood and trunk, trying to get some of these large, massive items that were up high, that were sort of well above where the center of gravity in this car lies, trying to get that weight off and just reduce mass. For windshield, we went with pieces from Shields Windshields. We'll throw you a link to them. Shields does, this is essentially a pre-cut piece from Shields. It comes ready to install. It's actually already sort of curved a little bit. It literally came out of the box looking just like the piece that came out of here and was installed by some local glass guys. So yeah, Michael Spencer says no AC when it gets to Michigan. I don't think I'm outing you too much here. Michael Spencer is actually about to be the new owner of this Mustang, which is part of the reason we are doing a wrap-up on it. You may have seen that we had some classified ads for this car. The car has been sold. Michael Spencer is going to be taking it up to Michigan, and he is going to be running it at some of the tracks up there. This is going to be a phenomenal Waterford Hills car. I will tell you that much. Michael is near Detroit, I believe. This is going to be a fantastic Waterford Hills car. Like the third and fourth gear on this car is so fun. It's so sort of in its element at those speeds that I'm looking forward to hearing how it does up there. So we wanted to get the mass down. So how much did we lose? Okay, we're 3,600 pounds going across the scales at the end of 2016. Front glass, we lost close to 20 pounds. We went from like a 32 pound glass windshield to about an 11.5 pound polycarbonate windshield. We actually also have a couple of tear-offs on here from tearoffguys.com. Big shout out to Carl, he's a big fan of the show. So we lost quite a bit of weight there. On the rear glass, we had not quite as much weight savings. It's a smaller piece of glass, but a considerable weight savings nonetheless. I think we saved about 17 or 18 pounds on the rear glass. The stock rear glass was actually quite thick and had the defroster elements in there. So we went from like a 25 pound rear glass to a little under 10 pounds for this piece from Shields Windshields. Hood and trunk, we also saved a considerable amount of weight. Now the stock hood on these S197s is aluminum, so it's not super heavy to begin with, but anything we can get off of there is fantastic. So we went from like a 36 pound aluminum hood, actually more than that, because we took off some of the hinges and there's some of the hinge hardware as well. Down to like a 12 or 13 pound, 17 or 18 pound fiberglass hood from VFN Fiberglass. In the rear, again, not as much metal back there, so not quite as much savings. Went from a little over 20 pounds to well under 10 pounds. So another 15, 17 pounds savings there in these alternate materials. Inside, big weight savings is probably from the passenger seat. Ed, you can probably take a look in there. We've got essentially what is a dune buggy shell passenger seat. The rules on passenger seats is it has to exist and a person has to be able to sit in it. There are not many rules at all, so that is a non-adjustable dune buggy seat on some aluminum mounts. I would not allow somebody I loved to sit in it, maybe, but it's fine for you. And it only weighs about 11 pounds as compared to the 55 pounds or so of the stock seat. Rear seat delete was not actually a huge weight savings. The rear seat, I want to say it was only like 12 or 13 pounds of foam, essentially. There's almost no structure to the rear seat pads. I think we took about 14 pounds total between brackets and padding out of there. And then the delete kit weighs, a couple of 2-3 pounds. So rear seat delete, you're only looking at about a 10 pound savings. Not huge, but it was a cheap seat delete kit. So not a big deal. Just checking to see, so Michael's going to be at Gingerman and Gratin. It'll be a good Gingerman car too, man. I'm actually not that familiar with Gratin, but yeah, it's going to be a dynamite Gingerman car. And we'll actually talk a little bit about setup for some stuff like that before too long. So I'm just checking here to see if we have any questions, and not a ton of stuff. So that was our exterior weight savings. Car still has metal fenders. We've done a little bit of rolling on the fenders to help these 335s fit, but ultimately the fenders were not really the problem of fitment on the 335s. Once we get the car up in the air, I'll show you the challenges there for making the 335s fit, because there were a couple, and there were a couple of compromises. You start looking at any of these project cars, you start looking at like, well, if I had it to do all over again, what would I do different? And there are probably still a few things I would change, but overall we did a fairly good job with this car. I'm really happy with how it came out. Under the hood, things are mostly stock. Our first dyno tests showed the car to be fairly healthy. We were putting out in the neighborhood of, and this is all in the magazine, I want to say close to 370 horsepower at the wheels when we first did the bone stock dyno tests. We did add several hard parts to the car. K&N cold air intake, which got us just bolting that on, picked up 5 or 6 horsepower. We originally added an MRT stainless steel exhaust, which in addition to saving about 22 pounds, picked up another 7 or 8 horsepower just by bolting on. And then we also did some tuning with both an SCT handheld tuner and an AEM programmable standalone engine management system. You can actually read all about the AEM in the last issue. We're actually hanging on to the AEM because we're going to use it on a car that can better take advantage of its capabilities. But bottom line, both the SCT and the AEM increased horsepower over the stock tune by similar amounts. The SCT, fantastic little handheld tuner, actually lets you go fairly deep into the programming, and let us, just by clicking a few buttons and doing a reflash, let us pick up another 5 or 6 horsepower on top of that. So that was our original first round of engine mods. Next round of engine mods, we threw a set of BBK headers on there, which picked us up. That was, I think, our biggest single gain for one part. We were actually at our final dyno test with the BBK long tube headers on there. We were over 420 horsepower at the wheels, which is a really healthy number for these cars. So Andrew wants to know, removing the rear seats changes it to CAM S. So no, actually it doesn't, Andrew. CAM S is a class for cars that were designed as 2-seaters. So if it's a Corvette or a Cobra or a pickup truck or anything else, Pontiac Solstice, anything that was originally designed as a 2-seater. If your car was designed as a 4-seater, it goes into CAM C if it's a contemporary car with ABS, or CAM T if it's an older car with no ABS and no electronic controls. So yeah, you're allowed to delete the rear seat, but because it originally came with 4 seats, it's still considered a 4-seater for CAM C. We'll take a better look at the headers when we get under there, because they're kind of pretty from underneath. But first time we ran this car on track, on a high-speed track, was when we first started running into some sorting issues. It had been a fantastic autocross car, very reliable. First time we had it out on track, we started to notice some temperature anomalies. We started to see it running a little bit hot after a couple of laps, and we started to see a lot of fluttering and movement from the stock hood. At the time we had the stock hood on there. Now what we eventually tracked that down to was because of our splitter installation. This is a splitter from CRC Industries. It's made from a material called Tegris, which is essentially a pressure-formed carbon fiber material. Cool thing about this splitter, though, well, the cool thing and the complicated thing is this splitter runs all the way back to the front K member. So it completely encloses the entire area under the engine, so it gives you a lot more flat surface under the car. It's fantastic for airflow under the car. What it's not fantastic for, though, is airflow out of the engine bay. So what we were having happen was we were having all this air come into the engine bay through the grill, get stacked up in there, not be able to exit out from underneath, and that's what was flopping the hood around, and that's what was causing our temperatures to creep up a little bit, is all that hot air was essentially getting captured in that engine bay by our splitter down there. So our solution, once we added our fiberglass hood from VFN, was a couple of these. These are hood vents from TrackSpec Motorsports. TrackSpec, cool company out in Southern California, makes both fitted and universal hood vents for a bunch of cars. I think they just came out with some BMW Z4 vents. If you scroll way back, we actually did a really cool show where we were showing you different pressure readings on the hood of air pressure at different points of the hood when the car was in motion. So what we ended up doing is locating these vents at the lowest area of pressure on the hood to extract as much of that air out from under the hood as possible, and it essentially solved our heating issues and our pressure issues, and actually ultimately gained us some downforce or lost us some lift, because with the stock setup, when you have that air vented out from under the car, you're creating high pressure under the car. With this, you're getting rid of that high pressure under the car. You're letting the splitter do its job, let that airflow get under the car, remain low pressure relative to the air around it, and you're putting any high pressure area up here on top of the car where it can make some downforce. So that was that went a long way to solving the cooling issue and the aerodynamic issues. Our Fluidine radiator also helped us out with those cooling issues. This is a 6-core Fluidine radiator. It is an absolute beast. It is the same weight as the stock radiator, which is much thinner. Drops right in, thing installs in less than an hour, and it is a really solid piece of machinery. So those those issues are basically done. Yeah, Michael says he's new to autocross, wants to make sure he's going into the right class. He had a question about whether deleting your rear seat puts you in CAM S. Well, actually, we'll throw up a link to the CAM rules. David, if you want to throw up a link to the CAM rules, if you get a minute, go to the SCCA page, and you go to autocross and then CAM, and then there's a link to the CAM rules. It's a fantastic class. We over the last 2 years, we have met and connected with so many amazing people in the CAM community. Raleigh and Velma Boreen out of the Indy region SCCA are essentially the managers of the class. All the rules kind of start and end with Raleigh as kind of the benevolent dictator of the class, and has done an amazing job in building this. I mean, there were 55 cars in CAM-C at Nationals this year. There were 60-some cars at the CAM event in Peru, Indiana, a month before that. There is obviously something that is resonating very, very well with the autocross community with these cars. So let's take a look before we throw it up in the air. A couple of the things we did inside here. I want to talk about some of the things that I would think would be essential modifications if you're building a Mustang. One of the first one is going to be a good seat. Stock Mustang seats of this generation, they suck. I mean, Ford, I love you, but the stock seats that come in a Mustang are not up to the capabilities of these cars, even stock. This is a Momo Super Cup XL, XL for the more ample gentleman. And it fits in here very nicely. It's on a seat bracket from Planted with just a couple of generic seat sliders in there, so it's fully adjustable. This seat actually was what we drove to all the events in. It's comfortable enough where with a little bit of additional butt padding, it is 100% comfortable enough for a 1,500-mile drive from here to Lincoln, Nebraska. You're a little tender after that, but it's a darn, for a race seat, really, really comfortable. I'm going to miss this seat a lot when it's gone. So I consider this an essential modification for a Mustang. I don't think people pay nearly enough attention to human factors in race cars. People, well, how do I make my car faster? One of the easiest ways to make your car faster is for you, the person doing all of the operation of the car, to be more comfortable and to be in a position where you can physically do your best work. So one of the things you should absolutely spend time on when you're building a race car is putting yourself in whatever position it is that you feel you can do your best work. And we all have slightly different driving positions that we like. I mean, there are some standards you should sort of look at to start with, but everybody's going to tweak individually. So yes, absolutely spend time putting yourself in the right position. You don't want to ever come back from an autocross run or come back from a track session and think to myself, my God, if my foot wasn't falling asleep, I could have been a second faster, or if I could have just gotten a little more leverage on the wheel, or if I didn't have to stretch my ankle out to fully depress the clutch, I could have been faster. Those are bullcrap excuses. Fix it, especially in a class like CAM where you can do anything you want. Just fix it. Put yourself where you need to be. Okay, enough preaching. So, essential modification, I think, is a proper driver's seat. Another thing that I liked quite a bit that we have in this car, and it's not really much to look at, we have something called the auto blip system on this car, which is a little digital box that essentially interrupts the signal from the electronic throttle and goes in the middle there and lets you essentially pick up brake and clutch and throttle signals that automatically blips the car on downshifts for you, and it's completely tunable. Within there, you can tune both the delay of the blip and the forcefulness of the blip. They're only a few $100. It's a fantastic. They're available for a bunch of different cars, like nearly almost anything with an electronic throttle that's sporty. Auto blip has a unit for, and yeah, man, I know we all really need to know how to heel and toe because it's a good skill to have. But when you can just pound that brake and have the thing match revs for you, it's a nice touch. Believe me, it's one less thing to worry about. So yeah, Andrew's asking about rev matching. It actually doesn't perfectly rev match, but you can tune, like I say, both the timing of the blip and the amount of the blip to essentially make it match revs as good as you're going to do with your foot. So yeah, Calvin says a big pull for him to go from F Street to STP are the seats. Yeah, man, stock seats in these Mustangs are terrible. Josh wants to know how his headroom in these things. He's 6'4". So I'm like 5 on a good day. I'm like 5'6". So if headroom is a problem for me, headroom is a problem. With the stock seat in a Mustang and my helmet, headroom is not great. You can actually feel it when you get in and out. Like my head rubs the roof with a helmet on with the stock seat in a Mustang. With our Momo seat in here, you can actually there's actually lower settings than this available. With that planted seat bracket and just almost any set of generic sliders, you can get a race seat as low as you ever want to go in one of these things. Like if you can physically fit in a Mustang, you can get in a race seat in a Mustang. So yeah, Danny Ko says rev match in a Type R is amazing. It is. Like I'm not ever going to complain about electronic driving aids that make your driving experience better. And yeah, it's fun to turn everything off and do burnouts and stuff, but it's also fun to get in a well-tuned modern car like a Dodge Viper or a C7 Corvette that has these sort of adjustable driver aids that the Acura NSX is a fantastic example of a car that some of the driver aids just make you feel like a better driver. They don't feel like they're intruding. They don't feel like they're limiting you. You just feel like I'm really, really good at this, and you don't know that it's the car doing all that stuff. So okay. Carl wants to know if we still have the second layer of tear off. We do actually, man. We still have. Carl put 2 layers of tear off on this thing. We still have both layers on there. I probably the top layer is ready to rip off. I will let the new owner do that should he so decide. But we put 2 layers of tear offs on there. I've been driving on the street with those tear offs on there. No optical troubles at all. And on the racetrack, obviously they're just an extra layer of safety. Even though these windshields have a great water repellent coating on them and they're very strong, nice to have that little additional layer of insurance on there. So let us head underneath the car. We'll roll it back a little bit and get her up on the lift. And while I'm doing this, I will combine the rolling the car onto the lift with the commercial message part of the lift. Folks, if you go to autobooksaerobooks.com, we're going to throw a link up to actually the new version of this book right here. There's been a lot of trouble in the Caribbean recently, and I'm not using this as a perverse segue, but it just got me thinking about how fun it was to go to some of these Bahama historic road races. And I started looking through this book, which is Bahama Speed Weeks by Henry O'Neill. There's a new version of this book out that not only covers the original Bahama Speed Weeks back in the 50s and 60s, but the revival of the Bahama Speed Weeks in the 80s and 90s, and now even into today, into the aughts and the aught teens, I suppose you would call it. Really, really cool piece of history that covers road racing in both Freeport and Nassau, and it was it was amazing going to a couple of those and seeing historic racing in such a beautiful setting, and seeing so many enthusiastic people come out and support those races. These books are a fantastic history of that. We're going to throw a link up to the new version of this book at autobooksaerobooks.com. So check that out if you are into old-timey road racing and stuff that's cool to do in the Bahamas. Also want to direct your attention to the CRC shelf here. You can see ultimately a fairly small selection of CRC's 15,000 plus products that they have for automotive, industrial applications, food service applications. Every week several weeks, I found myself doing something on the show using a product from another manufacturer, and then later finding out that CRC actually made a similar product, and I didn't even know about it. So, for example, spray adhesive. We used some spray adhesive a couple weeks ago, and silly me, CRC makes spray adhesive. So they also make, do I have any wasp and hornet killer? No, I think I've actually used all the wasp and hornet killer. They make a phenomenal wasp and hornet killer, and after the storms, we've had a lot of moisture around here. We're getting a ton of wasps building nests. So, so yeah, look, you don't have to rush out and buy CRC stuff tonight. But if you need any of the, if you need carb cleaner, if you need fuel injection cleaner, if you need lithium grease, power lube, dielectric grease, any of this stuff, and you buy CRC products, it's a great product. I mean, the bottom line, fantastic product. But they also are proud supporters of not only this show, but many other facets of amateur and professional motorsports. So just by buying their stuff, kind of helping yourself out, because you're providing a fun world for yourself to do fun stuff in. So that is my CRC speech. And actually, you know what? It wouldn't hurt my feelings a bit if you like went to CRC's social media site and said like, hey, we really enjoy that you guys are supporting the GRM live show. That's really cool, you guys, to do. Because they read that stuff. You know, they know what time it is out on the street. Under the back of the car here, because it doesn't quite go on the lift without a little bit of help. And we used to use the trailer hitch to jack it up. The trailer hitch actually made a fantastic place to lift it from, but alas, the trailer hitch is no more. She's a real race car now. And has no use for such childish things. So here we go. We will get underneath this thing and take a look at the real sexy bits, because from the outside, it's mostly just a cool looking Mustang. But when you get underneath is where you see the really neat stuff going on. And I'm working the lift this week, so I'm not going to put it up higher than I can reach like Tom does every week. Yeah, so Calvin, one of our viewers on Facebook, says he's 5'10" with a helmet. He's got to lean the seat back and reverse the headrest or raise it as high as it'll go. Yeah, man. These things are a little tricky on headroom with the stock seats. All right, so let's talk a little bit about wheels and tires here. 18x11 forge line wheel. Forge line, obviously really big, like in the World Challenge crowd, the Conti Tire Challenge scene. Really nice wheels. Really light. Without balance weights on them, right at 19 pounds each for these wheels. With the tire, I want to say these 335 Rivals are like 27 pounds each. So you're looking at a wheel and tire assembly, you know, a couple pounds shy of 50 pounds for a 335 3018 on 18 by 11 inch wheels. That's a lot of wheel and tire be under 50 pounds. The stock wheels and tires, the stock 19-inch wheels and tires were like 255 40/19. They're like 58 pounds each. And you don't get, you know, this just absolutely brutal width. So take a look at some suspension stuff and what we had to do to get our camber. First off, we ran a square wheel setup. Actually, normally when you run wheels this wide on a Mustang, you have to run different offset front and rear. It's really, really easy to get this much wheel and tire under the back of a Mustang. Not quite as easy to get it under the front. But we really wanted to run a square setup so we could rotate. You can actually see, you know, even though this is a 200 treadwear street tire, you can actually see how sticky these tires are, just how much debris they pick up just from rolling around the shop. You know, they pick up debris like race tires do. And actually, it's cool if the car sits for a few days and you move it, you actually get that kind of like sticky sound of the car moving for the first time. So let's look at what we had to do to get this much wheel on here. We had to run a fairly big spacer. These are like 24, 25 millimeter spacers in the front, so nearly an inch thick of spacer in the front. Now normally you could run a wheel with a different offset. You wouldn't have to run the spacer. There are wheel setups available that don't force you to run the spacer. We wanted to rotate, so we ended up going with a set of longer ARP studs, pressing those into the stock hubs, putting the spacers on there, so we essentially got the offset that way. Rather than getting the offset with the wheel, we got the offset with the spacers. Everybody's afraid of spacers. Spacers are nothing to worry about as long as you've got proper interaction between your lug nuts and your lugs. The wheel doesn't know the spacer's there. Essentially, ideally the spacer's under a clamp load. Like everyone's like, oh, I'm going to shear studs off. If you're shearing studs off, you did something wrong. These studs should never really have any sort of radial load on them. They are just there to provide clamp load. There's guys like that are running off-road Jeeps with 2.5-inch spacers on them, and as long as they're clamped down properly, you're fine. So Andrew wants to know, would a 275, 35, or 40 18 be a good choice? Little narrow. If it's all you can get, it's better than nothing. But in a few minutes, when I start talking about the rear end, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you where that's really going to hurt you. And actually, the width is not going to hurt you as much as what it's going to do to your gearing. So we'll talk about that when we get back to the rear end. All right. So this was originally a track pack car, which came with a set of Brembo brakes in the front, and we have replaced them with these 4-piston aluminum Kenny Brown brakes and their aluminum centered rotors. It's like a 14.25-inch rotor in the front. This is the Kenny Brown Pro 4R brake kit. It's a kit that was essentially designed by Kenny Brown in conjunction with Bear Brakes, developed from their World Challenge cars. World Challenge, they were originally running a 6-piston caliper in World Challenge. World Challenge came to them and said, hey, you guys can't run 6-piston calipers, you got to run a 4-piston caliper. So they essentially took the same size caliper, same size pads, remachined it to be a 4-piston caliper, and we're like, man, take that World Challenge, we're putting the same brakes back on, but we've only got four pistons. So Michael wants to know what kind of pads are we running, and which is going to be important for him because he's going to be the one driving the thing at Gingerman. We are running a set of Hawk Street / race pads. It's a newer compound that Hawk came out with, and I'll pull one out here. These are just phenomenally meaty brake pads. And you can see I was able to pull that pad out without using any tools. They've got this really cool sort of quick release on top of the pads. These have, I mean, half a season on them, and you can still see how thick they are. I mean, that's like a good sized porterhouse right there. Pros and cons of these brake pads. pros being they are fantastic. The feel and the performance of the pads is amazing. Among the best brake pads I have ever used. They're it's a pad that's got enough of a light touch that it allows you to make little adjustments in corners and actually sort of kind of tickle the brake pedal with your toe and do some real fine weight transfer stuff, or you can just mash the thing and it just sucks your eyes right out of the front of your head. Really versatile pad. Also makes bitchin' sparks. Like we got a great picture from Nationals of like sparks coming off the front. The downside is they are filthy. I mean, they are probably while it might be the best brake pad I've ever used, or among the best brake pads I've ever used, it's also among the dirtiest pads I have ever used. And that's the trade-off. You just have to realize that by the time you finish your second session, your wheels are dirty, and that's just that's the trade-off. Chase wants to know the back spacing on the wheels. Dude, I should have looked that up beforehand. We can go to. I don't want to say the wrong thing, and I've actually spent quite a bit of time today looking at backspacing on other wheels, and I think I'm going to say a number that's not the right number, so I'm not even going to say the number. We'll go to the Forge Line website. We'll actually look up our notes, get you the right information, and we'll post it as a response to your question, because I want to make sure to get you the right info. Actually, we could probably see if we could measure here real quick. That's pretty close. So that's like 8 inches of backspace coming off of there. So we'll get you the real number on that. And I apologize. I spent a lot of time today looking at wheel specs on our next project car, and I do not want to accidentally quote you the wrong thing. Okay. Let's see if we have any questions. Okay, so let's work our way up here a little bit. Motion control suspension, double adjustable shocks. These are the non-remote reservoir versions of the MCS shocks. MCS makes a remote reservoir and a non-remote reservoir. We went with the non-remotes purposefully, essentially. They're a little bit lighter. Obviously, you don't have the additional complexity and weight of the fluid canisters, and you don't have to drill any holes in the inner fender to get those to mount those canisters. The insides of the shocks, the guts of the shocks, are exactly the same, whether they're remotes or non-remotes. Same shock, same mechanical principles, same adjustment, same everything. Where we'd recommend the remote reservoir shocks specifically is for endurance racers, for guys that are going to spend 2, 3, 4 hours in a car on track. That's where I would start to recommend a remote reservoir shock. If you're doing track days, if you're doing sprint races, you can make an argument for the bling factor, but I can make just as good of an argument that if you're doing 20, 30, 40, even up to 60-minute track sessions, you're not going to put the kind of sustained heat into your shocks, where you're going to need the additional cooling capacity of a remote reservoir, and you're going to save on weight, and you're going to save on complexity. So, yeah, it looks cool having those reservoirs zip tied to your to the car in there. But do you need them? If you're running track days, if you're running sprint stuff, probably not. Okay, so but there was a challenge with the MCS shocks, and the construction, the design of the MCS shocks made it a little bit tricky to get the kind of camber that we really wanted out of the car. For a track car, for Michael, for the new owner, the car's right where it needs to be, probably, right? It's about 2.7 degrees of negative camber on both sides. For solo nationals, where you're running on incredibly grippy concrete and you're being extremely aggressive with transitions, we probably could have used another half a degree of camber out of the car. Now we did a few, and just the diameter of the bodies of the MCSs make it a little bit tricky, and the construction of the ears. If we had to do all over again, I might have taken these back off, had a machine shop give me a little more slot on some of the knuckle mounting ears in here, so I could get a little bit more camber. We are running a set of Vorschlag camber plates up top. I can get the light in here for you, Ed. Those helped quite a bit, and actually allowed us to get a little more caster as well. So yeah, these, even though we've got this one a little bit lighter, and even if you're at minimum weight in a car like this, it's just still a heavy car. 3,200 pounds is a lot of weight on a car. It's a lot of weight in a strut car, which doesn't always have the best camber curve to it. So a little bit of additional static camber, especially in a grippy autocross situation. Autocross on concrete is really demanding on a little bit of additional front camber. So if you're chasing those last couple of hundredths of a second and you're autocrossing on concrete, you're going to want 3.2, 3.5, maybe even degrees of camber in the front. 2.7, asphalt, fantastic. On track, where you're transferring weight slower and more progressively, fantastic. Autocross on concrete, we were maybe giving up a little bit by not finding that last quarter or half a degree of camber in the front of the car. Now, one of the things we did spend some time working with some of our suppliers on, and raise the car up a little bit, is getting the roll centers corrected in the front of the car. So Mustangs, even from back in the Fox body days, have always had issues with roll center locations. So what do we mean by roll center locations? Well, we had a great explanation of it, or what I thought was a great explanation of it, in one of the early stories on this. But basically, your suspension is going to have a point about which it rotates, or because of your suspension geometry, your car will have a point about which it rotates when lateral forces are applied to it. When you change the geometry of your suspension, when you lower it, if you shorten those springs, the outsides of these control arms is going to go up. You could actually have a situation where, when the car is at rest, the outside of your control arm, where the ball joint is higher than the inside of your control arms. So you have this kind of situation going on with your control arms, and that roll center, that point around which the car wants to rotate, could move to crazy places. It actually moves underground, which is really bad. It just creates these weird virtual leverages on the car dynamically, which are not conducive to handling at all. So to correct that, what you have to do is, when you lower the car, you've got to essentially change let's see what the best way for Ed to get a look at this is in this stupid. Let me raise the car up a little bit for you, Ed. So what you want to end up doing is, I'm going to move the light in front of you real quick. Here, step over the cord. So you want to move this outside pivot point up. It's hidden by these baffles, but this is a Steeda roll center correcting ball joint in the front. The ball joint is essentially extended. It moves this knuckle up relative to the control arm, and when you lower the car and naturally lower this, or you raise this pivot point here, this pushes the outside pivot point back down, restores proper geometry, everything's cool again. Similarly, when you lower the car, you also change the geometry of your steering arms. You can get into a situation known as roll steer or bump steer, where your steering arms, as they travel through their range of motion, are changing the toe of the car. Because of the arc they describe, the distance between the outer point and the inner point changes considerably as they describe that arc. And when you lower the car, that situation is exacerbated. So also from Steeda, these roll steer correcting kits, it's a spherical ball joint, tie rod end, a series of shims there that are changeable and stackable, that lets you essentially set your tie rods parallel to the ground when the car is at rest. So let's take a look at a couple other things on the underside here that we can see. Front sway bar is an adjustable unit from Steeda, set at full stiff. This is their larger tubular bar, and this is a Ford Motorsport air intake scoop for the transmission. Well, we'll talk about transmission stuff in a minute too, because there's definitely problems to be solved with MT82 transmissions on these Mustangs. By the way, if anybody has questions or anything on either our Facebook or our YouTube feed, just throw them in the chat, and we will get to them as quick as we can. Okay, from the bottom, you can get a little bit better look at the BBK long tube headers. Did a lot of discussion in the magazine about long tube versus short tube headers. Not necessarily opposed to the use of short tube headers. The stock manifolds on these things are not bad, but if you're gonna install headers anyway, you're gonna get more gain from long tubes than you are from short tubes. Installation is essentially just as big a hassle on either. So if you're gonna go through the trouble to install anything, may as well install long tubes. Like I say, our gain was, it's like over 20 horsepower just on the installation of the headers. Also have some little race cats from BBK and an X-pipe from BBK. We had some good discussion in the magazine as well about X-pipes versus H-pipes. We've been a fan of X-pipes for a while. This is a BBK X-pipe. We've been a fan of X-pipes for a while. Conventional wisdom, which as we know is always right, says that X-pipes are better for horsepower and H-pipes are better for torque. In our testing, we have generally found that to be that whenever you can use an X-pipe, you should use an X-pipe, and you will not be disappointed. And on balance, you'll be in pretty good shape. So Andrew wants to know, would the FR500 versions of the bump steer kits with the long shank be good? Yeah, actually the FR500 bump steer kits and the FR500 roll steer or roll center corrector kits, they're very similar to the pieces that that Steeda uses. In fact, I think Steeda may actually supply the roll center corrector kits for Ford. But the bottom line is you want to fix it. Doesn't maybe necessarily matter exactly which pieces you use. We are huge fans of Steeda. They helped us out with our Fox Mustang many years ago. They are knowledgeable. Their stuff is fantastic, and we'll show you a couple more of their pieces as we go back here. But hard to go wrong with a company that's been in business that long and doing the cool stuff they're doing. One of the Steeda pieces you can't see, you might be able to get a peek at it over here, is the lightweight radiator core support. Can you see? Yeah, you can see the sway bar bolted to it. That was another about 10-pound weight savings right off the nose of the car. All part of our big weight loss program a couple years ago. So let's let me go up a little bit higher so Ed can actually fit under here. All right, so we talked a little bit about shifting and getting these MT82 transmissions to work properly. The MT82 transmission is not inherently bad. It's all right. I mean, it's not like, you know, super T10 good, but the biggest issue that it has really is that it has a remote mounted shifter. And what that means is the shifter is bolted, the shifter mechanism in the stock Mustang is bolted to the chassis of the car, and the transmission is bolted to the engine cradle and the structure under here. So essentially what happens is under power, the engine and transmission torques a little bit, it moves, and it moves independent of the shifter, and you get bind. And you get bind at times when you don't want bind, which is like under heavy loads, when you're trying to actually shift the thing. So this is, as far as I'm concerned, a mandatory piece on any S197 Mustang build. This is a shifter bracket from Blowfish Racing. What this does, installs in about 45 minutes. It bolts directly to the transmission, and the shifter mounts directly on top of it. So you essentially have a shifter that's now affixed to the transmission, not affixed to the unibody of the car. So as the transmission torques, so goes the shifter. So you might notice a little bit more movement and buzz from the shifter inside the car. When I say buzz, I'm talking about just a little higher frequency vibration, not like actual noise. You might notice a little bit more movement from the shifter inside the car, but the actual shift action is vastly improved. I mean, this was one of the best 45-minute jobs I ever did on this car, just in the sort of dramatic improvement that it made in the shifting. So I would consider one of these Blowfish Racing mounts mandatory for any Mustang able to use it. Now, you might say, well, what's the best short shifter to use? At that point, take your pick. It doesn't really matter. I mean, yeah, there are personal preferences, but the best short shifter in the world isn't going to improve anything unless you're mounting it to the transmission. Any short shifter or any aftermarket shifter that still mounts to the car is going to suck, because it's going to have the same bind issues. So until you fix that bind issue, don't even think about putting a short shifter on it. All right, so let's keep moving back. So, yeah, BBK X-Pipe. Got some subframe stiffeners here from Steeda. They make great lift points, great jack points. Stiffen things up between inner and outer frame rails and back to the rear suspension mounting points here. Let me reposition our light here. So if there's any sort of magic in this car, I think most of it is in the rear end, and it comes from a few pieces. where do you want to be at? You want to get all the way back there? That good? So any of the real dramatic sort of improvements of these cars, I think, are made in the rear end. It's a solid axle car, so it's got solid axles have both advantages and limitations. They do a few things very well, but you have to control them properly. And what we've done to control our rear axle is use this setup from Cortex Racing. If there was any sort of, people are like, well, what was the thing that made the biggest difference? Well, the shifter mount obviously was quick and simple and easy. As far as how the car actually drove, a proper rear suspension setup in one of these cars, utterly transformative. You know, it really turns it into a different car. It turns it from a sort of heavy-handed brawler of a car into a car that is legitimately nimble, and actually puts power down in a really sort of progressive, really predictable way. So most everything back here is from Cortex Racing. We'll throw a link up to them. Here's the big pieces that make it up. First off is a torque arm. Torque arm is what we use to control the attitude of the rear end. But torque arm essentially controls pinion angle. Pinion angle is normally controlled by a shorter, what they call upper third link. It's mounted on top of the differential. In fact, you can actually see our upper third link is just, it's still up there, it's just disconnected and zip tied out of the way. So that's what normally controls your pinion angle. Now that's an adjustable upper third link from Steeda. If you put an adjustable link on there, you've got a few advantages in that you can actually set proper pinion angle, which is important in getting power down properly, and you can actually sort of change the angle of the front of that third link to get it positioned properly. But ultimately, your upper third link is only that long, you know. So what's going to happen is as it moves up and down, there's going to be quite a bit of pinion angle change as that thing articulates. With a torque arm, you essentially eliminate all of those tendencies for the pinion angle to change, and you also move your instant center essentially to a much more valuable position. You're taking all of these loads from the rear end, from the rear end as it's twisting. Instead of transferring them through that really short arm up there, you're transferring them all the way to the center of the car, very near what? Very near the center of gravity of the car. So you're articulating the suspension around a point closer to the center of gravity of the car, which is going to be highly advantageous for how it transfers weight. So the other thing you're going to want to pay attention to is how are we going to control this rear suspension side to side. Stock setup is, where's my panhard rod? My range stick panhard rod is in the pile over there somewhere. Stock arrangement is through the use of a panhard rod. It's a rod that attaches to the chassis at this hard point right here, and then attaches to the axle at this hard point right here, and it essentially prevents the axle from moving side to side under cornering loads. But since you've got one attachment point on one side, one attachment point on the other side, you can start to see the problem there as well. As that axle moves up and down, it's also going to move side to side somewhat because that end of that panhard rod is moving through an arc. So that's going to make it want to move side to side and cause problems. You fix that through the use of a Watts link. Watts link designed by James Watt, the steam engine guy. Essentially, Watts link performs the same function as a panhard rod. It limits horizontal motion or lateral motion of the rear axle, but through this Watts linkage right here, through this bell cranked linkage, it prevents any side-to-side motion as it articulates. If you, David, to throw up an animation of a Watts link for everybody, because it's super cool to actually see this guy move up and down and there's no lateral displacement of this center point right here. The other thing you can do with a Watts link is by changing the vertical position of this center point, you can move the rear roll center. We talked about roll center in the front. Well, there's a roll center in the rear as well, and the roll center is defined by the point that this Watts link articulates around. This Cortex diff housing that mounts the Watts linkage has four individual settings for 4 different roll center heights. We have ours at the next to lowest. Right now, we've kind of gone back and forth between the this setting and the one just above it. The one just above it we found worked a little better when we were on a smaller tire. This one worked a little bit better on the larger tires. What you're looking at is you're looking at the relationship of your front roll center to your rear roll center. You want to have a little bit, generally you want to have a little bit, you want to have your front roll center slightly lower than your rear roll center. It makes the car point quicker. It makes the car want to rotate a little bit. You can play with that rear roll center very precisely just by adjusting these linkages. You can also see our paint marks on here. This was our only major point of failure in this car when I failed to properly torque the Watts linkage last year, and it fell off. But we've since corrected that by me not being so stupid, and by paint marking everything, and by using these Nordlock washers, which we actually did a show all about those Nordlock washers at one point. They're a fantastic addition, safety-wise, to any sort of high performance or critical fastener application. So yeah, this is where all the magic. If there's anything sort of transformative in any solid axle Mustang, it's going to come from the rear suspension, and this Cortex stuff is utterly phenomenal. Cortex also provided these adjustable lower control arms. Steeda provided these brackets that relocate your rear control arms. Again, just like with the front suspension, when you lower a Mustang, you run into some weird geometry issues. And what happens when you lower a Mustang and you leave the control arms in the stock mounting point is you have this situation where the rear control arm mounting point is higher than the front control arm mounting point. So what that produces is, under acceleration, you produce this leverage that actually wants to raise the rear axle off the ground. So it just sort of inherently wants to break traction. What you have to do is you have to relocate the rear mounts of these control arms to a point where they're lower than the front, and that way, under acceleration, the torque that it's providing is actually driving the rear axle into the ground. It's called anti-squat. There's a good article in Grassroots Motorsports magazine about it about a year ago. And actually, if you want to subscribe to Grassroots Motorsports magazine, how would I do that? Oh, you know what? I would go to grassrootsmotorsports.com/live deal. Just by going there, you get a 15% discount off your new or renewal subscription. I finally got the sub plug in. So, playing around with anti-squat, actually a valuable tool in tuning how well the car comes off of corners. And these rear control arms are also length adjustable, so what that allows you to do is get your wheelbase identical on both sides of the car, which you can see for obvious reasons why that would be important. And it also allows you to make, very slight wheelbase adjustments that you can use to fine-tune a few things as well. Spring-wise, we've used a couple of Steeda adjustable spring perches in the back. It's essentially a coilover perch that sits on the axle, allows you to make corner weight changes with a set of 2.5-inch coilover springs. Spring rate wise, we're running 400-pound springs in the front, 300-pound springs in the rear. We did find out that we were considerably undersprung compared to some of our competition, but would I go back and do that all over again? Yeah, I like the car where it is. Now, once Michael gets the thing out on Gingerman and he's using it in a more road race type setting, he may find going to a little bit heavier spring might be advantageous of him. He's not really transferring those loads quite as fast. He's in steady state cornering for longer periods of time. Might be an advantage in that situation to go to a little bit heavier spring. I think we were good for what we were doing with the car. Autocross wise, it wasn't harsh. It slalomed, like the transition on this car was fantastic. So I wouldn't be quick to change it unless I was running a lot of high-speed track events. So Steiner rear bar. Back here, non-adjustable, of course, the motion control, suspension, shocks. You can run coilovers on the rear of an S197. It's tricky to actually fit them up in there. You can actually see, that there's not a ton of room. You have to do some relocating of stuff to run coilovers, but it's doable. It's just, it might not, it might not necessarily be worth the hassle. All right, folks. So that is it. I'm glad we got a chance to do this because you guys have seen, we kind of kicked off the beta version of the live show with a lot of Mustang content, but we've never really done a full sort of end-to-end look at the car and kind of how it was built and put together. And I hope if you're out there building a Mustang, I hope you learned a few things, and we'll definitely get the information. I know, yeah. We'll get the information to the folks who want it. So yeah, Andrew says 335s make it hard to run a rear coil. Yeah, it's hard. Even if you're on 275s or something, it's tricky to run coilovers in the rear of one of these things. And there again, you can make an argument that there's a cause for it, but you can make just as good of an argument for keeping that additional weight closer to the center of mass of the car. So, if you insist on running coilovers, I'm not going to stop you, but I'm not going to tell you there's a powerful reason that you have to do it. So that is what about slicks? Oh, good question. So Michael wants to know, what about slicks on these cars, or on this car? If I was going to run slicks on this car or our compound tires on this car, yes, I would definitely go up in spring rate a little bit. One of the reasons we are a little bit light on spring rate is because of the use of these 200 treadwear street tires. These are amazingly grippy tires, but it's still a 200 treadwear street tire. So ultimately, this is kind of the fuse in the whole system. If I was going to run Hoosiers or our comps on here, where I was going to be putting that much more lateral force into the chassis, I would probably go. I'd probably start by going up 100 pounds on each end. Go up to about a 500 front, 400 rear, or maybe even go 500 front. Leave the rears where they are, and I'd adjust from there. Because we never really had any issues with rubbing on the car, but we also with a 200 treadwear tire, we're only putting so much lateral force into the car. Let's see. Oh, Danny wants to know if we talked about the Lexan windshield. Yeah, we did, man. You missed it, but wasn't that again? Shields Lexan windshield saved a little over 20 pounds on the front, a little under 20 pounds on the rear. It was installed by a local windshield company. I mean, they, you know, like it wasn't Safelite, but it was a company like Safelite that comes out and does mobile windshield installations. And I was like, I have my own windshield, and they were a little weird about that. But I finally found somebody that was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you're building a race car, whatever. We're just not going to warranty it. But they came out, you know, they said it installed just like any other windshield, using the same adhesives and materials, and the stock trim went right back in. And they said it was actually easier to install than a glass windshield because it was so light. I mean, they could practically pop it in with one hand. So okay, let's take a look here, see if we have any other questions. Michael says good information. Yeah, man. Hey, that's Michael Spencer there. That is the new daddy of this thing right here. He's coming down to get it later this fall, and I'm gonna miss it. You know, the nature of the job is that you can't really fall in love with this stuff forever, because eventually it's going to have to move on. You're going to have to write about something else. We've got to keep, you know, tens of thousands of readers and viewers interested, and we can't do that by writing about Mustangs forever. So we've got to move on to other stuff. But you know, you get attached to them, and I told myself I wasn't going to cry. But we're going to miss it. Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of fun, and I'm glad to see it going to somebody who is going to continue to just pound on it, because it loves that so much. All right, folks, that is it. Thank you for all the questions. If we missed any questions, I will. I'm going to go back and see if we missed anything here and get those answered. Thanks to everybody who is watching on Facebook. Thanks to everybody who is watching on YouTube. Thanks to all the folks who every week let me know that they are out there buying CRC products, and they are out there letting CRC know how much they appreciate that they are supporting motorsports activities and shows like this one and magazines like Grassroots Motorsports. We appreciate you letting them know that you are on board. I cannot stress enough what a big deal that is to us. It makes us feel really proud that we have a viewership base out there that cares enough about what we're doing to contact our sponsors and let them know how appreciative they are. And our friends at autobooksaerobooks.com. You can see the Autobooks Aerobooks bookshelf up there. Check them out at autobooks-aerobooks.com. Check them out for awesome books on the history of motorsports and photography and technical manuals, boats, airplanes, cars, motorcycles, and also check them out as a hub of automotive culture in Southern California. They have a fantastic calendar of events all over Southern California and events of their own every week. Folks, we will be coming to you next week installing waterless cooling from Evans Cooling. We're back here in the shop checking out the Evans waterless cooling system, and we've got the $2,017 challenge coming up October 21st and 22nd from Gainesville, Florida. Going to have hours and hours of live coverage from the challenge on Friday and Saturday of the challenge. So I hope you will join us for that. Thank you very much for taking one last look at Big Red here. We really appreciate it. It has been an honor and a privilege writing about this thing and driving it and meeting all of the fantastic folks in the CAM community, in the Optima community, in this amazing muscle car autocross community over the last couple of years. And we're looking forward to the next project car, which we're going to be bringing to you live right here on the show every week, just like this one. So hope you stick around. Folks, I'm JG Pasterjack. This is Grassroots Motorsports Live, presented by CRC Industries. Check us out on the web at grassrootsmotorsports.com. If you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube, last chance, throw us a like, throw us a share. We really appreciate it, and we will see you again next Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Good night, everybody.